Hello, everyone. We're going to start with a brief video, and then after the video, we'll be live. Hello, and welcome to the first applicant webinar for the fourth cycle of CLIR's Digitizing Hidden Collections, Amplifying Unheard Voices program. I'm Sharon Burney, Program Officer on the CLIR Grants team, and we're so glad to be here to share some information about the call for applications. We will start by making some introductions, first to this platform and then to our team. To start, we want to share some notes about how you can use Zoom during this session. A live transcript is being generated. To turn on this feature, click the CC Show Captions button at the bottom of your Zoom window. Attendees will be muted throughout the presentation. However, you're welcome to use chat for general introductions and conversation. If a chat box isn't already displaying on your screen, you can hover your mouse toward the bottom of the Zoom window and open it manually. To send a message to everyone, remember to change the default from host and panelists to everyone. We ask that you use the separate Q&A box to ask questions today. This box can be opened the same way as the chat box. We will be answering questions at the end of our webinar, and so we encourage you to keep track of your questions and submit them in Q&A box if they are not answered during the presentation. You can upvote questions if they're similar to your own to let us know that it would be helpful to you to have them answered live. If we don't have time to get to all of the questions, we'll compose responses to the remaining ones and post all answers along with the session transcript. The Q&A session recording and transcript will be available on our website's Apply for an Award page by the end of next week. The Council on Library and Information Resources, or CLIR, is an independent nonprofit organization with a mission to forge strategies to enhance research, teaching, and learning environments in collaboration with libraries, cultural institutions, and communities of higher learning. Although we're talking about a funding opportunity today, it's essential to understand that CLIR is not a funding agency. Instead, our programs are supported through sponsorships and external funding. For the Digitizing Hidden Collections, Amplifying Unheard Voices program, we receive funding from the Mellon Foundation, and CLIR acts as the regranting agency. Just as we receive proposals and reports from grant recipients, we also send proposals and reports to Mellon and other funding organizations.
CLIR's work is accomplished by a relatively small staff of about 20 geographically distributed individuals. Today's webinar is hosted by the CLIR Grants team, which administers CLIR's active regranting programs, offering support for the entire grant cycle from application to final report. The DHC AUV team is Sharon Burney, Program Officer located in Midlothian, Virginia, Alyson Pope, Program Officer located in Pittsburgh, PA, myself, Jane Larson, Senior Program Associate, also located in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Lizzi Albert, Community Relations Manager, located in Washington, D.C., and Louisa Kwasigroch, Managing Director, located in Chicago, Illinois. Our team would like to center today's conversation by acknowledging that as residents of the United States, we are speaking to you from unceded land of many Indigenous peoples. I'd like to respectfully acknowledge and recognize the original and current caretakers of the land, water, and air where I live, the Shawnee and Osage peoples, and all of their ancestors and descendants. I'm grateful to have the opportunity to live and work on their homelands and ask you to join me in acknowledging all Indigenous communities, their elders both past and present, as well as future generations. May this acknowledgement remind us of our shared commitment to beginning the process of working to dismantle the ongoing legacies of settler colonialism. Now that we've introduced ourselves, we'd love to hear from you. Please feel free to share your name, organizational affiliation, where you live, and any land acknowledgements in the chat. During the rest of our time together, we'll offer a program overview, including some history of digitizing hidden collections and definitions of core components of this program. Some detailed instructions and tips for applying to the program, including what to expect in the two parts of this program's application process, and time to answer your questions.
Let's now move into an overview of the Digitizing Hidden Collections program. The 2021 call for proposals launched the third iteration of a CLIR program whose roots date back to 2008. What started as a funding opportunity for nonprofit organizations to catalog hidden collections has transformed to continue the work of the digitization program with a thematic focus. The Cataloging Hidden Collections program supported more than 170 organizations with 128 projects documenting over 6 million items. The work of the first iteration of Digitizing Hidden Collections is coming to a close, but still underway, with more than 194 organizations participating in 100 funded projects that have already created more than 9 million master digital files. Amplifying Unheard Voices awarded funding to 33 projects at 78 organizations in the first two cohorts, and the third cohort's funded projects will be announced this fall. Amplifying Unheard Voices aims to fund projects that propose to digitize materials that deepen public understanding of the histories of people of color and other communities and populations whose work, experiences, and perspectives have yet to be sufficiently recognized in digital collections. These often hidden histories include, but are not necessarily limited to, those of Black, Indigenous, Latina, and other people of color, women, gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, non-binary, and other genderqueer people and communities, immigrants, displaced populations, blind, deaf, and disabled people and communities, and colonized, disenfranchised, enslaved, and incarcerated people. The program's core values reflect its broad objectives and thematic focus. We encourage you to use these core values as you develop projects, ensuring reviewers can see these elements woven throughout your application. Our reviewers will also focus their evaluations of applications on these same values. We hope the core values will encourage and challenge organizations to see how their digitization's work can be people-focused. More information on the core values is on the program homepage and in the FAQ section on the Apply for an Award page.
So what do we mean by digitization? All projects submitted for consideration must have digitization as the primary activity, which means the creation of digital representations of unique physical artifacts or objects, while descriptions such as cataloging or metadata creation and other work to enhance access, such as transcription or translation, may be included in projects. That work must be supplemental to the digitization work. This program does not support further description, manipulation, or migration to alternative digital formats for content that was born digital or has been previously digitized. The original objects nominated for digitization may be in any format, and projects may combine digitization of materials from a variety of formats, such as books, manuscripts, maps, 3D objects, textiles, various audio/visual formats, and more. If you have questions about what qualifies as a digitization project, contact the CLIR grants team. Next, what do we mean by hidden? For this program, applicants are asked to convincingly demonstrate that the materials nominated for digitization cannot meaningfully impact public understanding of people, communities, and populations whose work, experiences, and perspectives have been insufficiently recognized or attended in the past until those materials are digitized, discoverable, and made accessible. Full online access is desirable in a general sense, but may not always be possible. Instead, applicants are expected to envision modes of access that are ethical, legal, and respectful of the norms of source communities, explaining how digitization is critical to opening access to the materials is essential. We expect collections nominated for digitization to be in various stages of description, ranging from fully processed or session to minimal or no descriptive records available. Applicants are encouraged to design projects that fill description gaps in projects, using digitization workflows to think about how item or collection descriptions can be enhanced, corrected, and created. And finally, what do we mean by collections? For this program, special collections are rare or unique materials housed in secure, monitored environments and made available to the general public. Archives are unique, often unpublished materials associated with a specific individual, topic, location, or organization of historical and or cultural interest. While the materials nominated for digitization may be in any physical format, they must be owned and held by an eligible organization. Because of the thematic focus, the materials must also have been created by or describe communities and populations whose work, experiences, and perspectives fit the program's scope.
Visit the Funded Projects page for an idea of the scope and scale of work funded through this program. We are also working to update the Apply for an Award page with some application examples from Cohort 1 and 2 awardees. You can see a sampling of their representative images here. Now we'll work through how to apply. We have provided all the information you should need on our Digitizing Hidden Collections program pages. We'll share these links throughout the presentation and point to specific resources. As you consider applying to our program, the most essential resource for you is the application guidelines. Combining instructions and insights into the program and its application process, the guidelines also allow you to draft responses to questions before adding them to our online grant application platform. A view-only Google Doc is linked from the Apply for an Award program page. Users without a Google account can access this version and download the document in whatever file format they wish using the File menu. For those with a Google account, we've also included a link to create an editable copy of the document automatically. An updated version of the guidelines will be shared with those invited to submit a final application to the program.
The initial application comprises of 9 discrete tasks and 4 forms to collect information about your organization and project. The application guidelines address each task in much greater detail, but will cover a few important points today. The first task asks you to confirm your organization's eligibility, any collaborating organizations, and your project. We also include all eligibility details on our website and in the guidelines. In the initial application, we do not request any documentation confirming the eligibility of organizations according to our program's instructions. Documentation will be required if your proposal is invited to submit a final application. Of particular note, this program requires that materials nominated for digitization be owned and held by eligible organizations. If you are proposing a project that includes the digitization of materials from multiple eligible organizations, we require that you design a collaborative project.
In the applicant information task, you'll be asked to provide information on the organizations involved in the project. In this initial application round, we're most interested in collecting information on the potential collaborating organizations, if applicable. While collaboration is not a requirement of this program, our core values support authentic partnerships, which can take many forms. For this program, remember that organizations named collaborators typically contribute materials for digitization and or provide critical support for creating and maintaining access to digitized items over time. The final application will ask for more descriptive information on the nature of any collaborations. Please explore the application guidelines in our online FAQ for more information on collaborations. All projects must assign at least 1 and no more than 3 principal investigators or PIs to the project. PIs are CLIR's primary contacts throughout the application and funding process. Applicants do have the option of listing an additional contact during the application. The next task asks applicants to supply basic project information. As part of this section, applicants can assign up to 6 keywords or phrases that best describe the fields of study connected to your project. Rather than using general terms like digitization, which we assume will apply to all the projects submitted to the program, think of words or phrases that would help others quickly understand the content of the materials nominated for digitization. CLIR staff will use this information as we assign applications to reviewers for evaluation. You will mark that your application is a resubmission if you have submitted a project proposal with the same nominated materials to a previous cycle of the Amplifying Unheard Voices program. As you enter the information on the size of your request and the project timeline, abide by the program's restrictions. All projects should request a minimum of $50,000 and a maximum of $300,000. Funding amounts will be awarded in US dollars with actual funds distributed according to the location of the lead applicant organization based on current exchange rates as necessary. All projects must be 12, 24, or 36 months and begin on January 1st, 2027. The initial project details task contain the primary content of the initial application. This is where we ask applicants to tell the story of their materials and their organization and explain the need for funding from this program. Each of the 6 prompts allow up to 500 words to engage the reviewers in your story. The responses to each of these prompts connect to the core values of this program, and for those invited, will be used to start building final application submissions. Reviewers will be using a rubric for the assessment of initial applications, and these prompts will provide the heart of your proposal in their assessment. The application guidelines offer instructions and deeper insights into these prompts to help guide your application writing. You can also find the reviewer rubric in Appendix B. There are 2 upload sections in the project details. First is the budget narrative upload and the need for support section. Here you will outline your estimated project costs broken down by the program's allowable cost categories. It is required to use the linked budget narrative template, which provides additional instructions on completing this upload. The application guidelines provide full details on allowable costs and budget limits in Appendix A. The budget narrative is meant to serve as a ballpark estimate with the understanding that it may be adjusted if invited to the final application round. There are no service provider quotes required in the initial application. The second upload section is an optional space for additional uploads. Applicants can include appendices with this application, provided their relevance to the project is clear and their length is reasonable given anticipated heavy demands on review panelists' time. Some examples of relevant additional document uploads could be a collections assessment document or donor agreements related to the materials being proposed for digitization.
Once you've completed all the required tasks in the online system, you'll have the option to review and submit your proposal. This gives you one last chance to review everything you've written and uploaded and go back to make edits. Once you are confident your application is complete, click the Submit Your Application button and click Submit again if prompted. Once submitted, you'll see your application in the My Application space and be able to download a copy for your records. A confirmation email will be sent from the SM Apply system, and check your spam folders if you don't see that within 24 hours. The grants team is always happy to answer any questions about the application submission process. An independent review panel reviews applications for the Digitizing Hidden Collections program. CLIR maintains a largely standing panel of reviewers with expertise in digitization, digital collections, rights, ethics, and reuse, and various academic subjects. Their names and affiliations will be posted on our website by the end of the initial application period. During the initial review process, at least 1 reader and 2 reviewers will read each application, and a portion of applications will be invited to prepare an application for the final stage. Initial applications must be submitted online by October 20th, 2025. We anticipate that all organizations that submit an initial application will be notified if they are invited to submit a final application in mid-February 2026. We provide additional support to those organizations invited to the final round to help develop initial applications into competitive final applications. We anticipate making the public announcement of funded projects in November of 2026.
We also anticipate that the size and scope of the final application will be similar to previous digitizing hidden collection cycles. We aim for you to use the groundwork of your initial application to build the complete final application. It may be productive in this stage to think about how you'll expand your responses in the final round, providing more complete descriptions of the collections, their significance and potential impact, rights, ethics, and reuse, institutional capacity, and the project design and long-term sustainability of the digital deliverables. The section that will require the most development will be the project work plan. The final application will also require uploads, including letters of institutional support from your organization and external letters of support from the communities represented in the materials and scholars. We want to emphasize these letters of support are for the final application only and cannot be included as additional uploads in the initial application. The application guidelines for the initial application include the outline of the final application sections shown here to encourage forethought for expanding on the initial application if invited.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Louisa Kwasigroch, Managing Director at CLIR. I lead our regranting portfolio, including the Digitizing Hidden Collections, Amplifying Unheard Voices program. I have the privilege of managing the grants team, whose members provide excellent support for applicants and grantees and ensure our programs stay aligned with CLIR's mission and values. What I'd like to do today is share a few key reminders to help you strengthen your application and avoid common mistakes. So, the Digitizing Hidden Collections Amplifying Unheard Voices program was intentionally designed with clear core values and review criteria. Reviewers will assess applications based on those values and the published guidelines. Before you apply, consider these questions. Is this the right program for your collection? Does your organization meet all the requirements? And can you make a compelling case for why this project should be funded? If the answer to those questions is yes, then double check that your materials, organization, and expenses are truly eligible. Carefully follow the application guidelines. Do not include disallowed costs or ineligible activities. And proofread before you submit because clarity matters. A few more important reminders. We hate to see it, but applications will be disqualified if they include disallowed costs, ineligible materials, or come from ineligible organizations. Let me repeat that. Applications can and will be disqualified. Again, please check those eligibility requirements before you proceed. And of course, when in doubt, our team is always available to help. Please reach out to us at hiddencollections@clir.org. Thank you for that. And now we'll move to the question and answer portion of the webinar with program officers Sharon Burney and Alyson Pope. Sharon and Alyson.
We're going to turn to question and answers. We did want to note a super short survey about the webinar. This is part of our program's assessment, so your honest feedback on the webinar will help us in our future support efforts, and we'll share the link in the chat and in an email after the event. And now we're going to turn to your questions. We'll do our best to answer as many as we can. Any unanswered questions will be answered in our transcript, which will be shared on our website along with the webinar recording. So I'm going to bring down the screen share. And we can get started. Sharon, do you want to take the first one?
Sure will. And make sure you're putting those questions in the Q&A box so that they can move it over for us. You mentioned that projects can fill description gaps for collections. Is archival processing, descriptive inventory, qualifying expense to prepare materials for digitization? This is a iffy subject. you want to have an idea of what's in your collections and what you want to nominate for the digitization process. We do expect as you uncover or send items off for digitization, or as you're the vendor, if you do outside vending or you do it yourself in-house, you're going to see some things that you didn't expect to be in your collections. We expect that those should be minimum and they should be attached to what's necessary to prepare your nominated materials and your digitization process for the digitization process. On the back end, we do expect some metadata description expenses in it. So yes, to an extent.
Yeah, so there's a further question to clarify if required for digitization, can we request funding for description and cataloging of
Yes.
the collection? Yeah, we expect, I mean, there's a metadata component that's required in this program and that doesn't really come, you can't really get there without doing the description and cataloging work that you're talking about. So we don't necessarily see that as happening prior to digitization in all projects, but as we do see it happen.
Yeah. And also, to speak just a little further for any future questions, we do require that the metadata be made publicly available unless there's some issues with sensitivity and that don't require it.
Um, do oral histories qualify as rare materials? Can we apply to collect oral histories as well as archival materials? So oral histories can qualify as rare materials, but the purpose of the program is digitization rather than collection. So if you have a currently existing oral history collection that is like on an obsolete format, like cassette tapes, and you want to digitize those oral histories, then like yes, they could qualify as an appropriate rare and unique collection for the program. But the program is not designed for you to go out and create new collections, like making new oral histories by doing interviews.
Are cross-border collaborations allowed, assuming both collaborators are eligible organizations, one in Canada and one in US? Yes, and that would probably be a first for us. So we're excited about that possibility. Yes, if both of you are nonprofits or cultural heritage centered organizations, and you're both nonprofits or qualify as an eligible organization, yes, you can.
If one of the collections holders is not a 501(c)(3), is a fiscal sponsor acceptable? Can multiple collections holders apply if only one is a 501(c)(3)? All applying organizations have to meet all eligibility requirements. So it's not just limited to the lead applicant, it applies to all applying orgs. So all applying orgs would have to have the necessary IRS designation or be a public government entity or similar to be eligible to apply.
I have two separate questions about oral histories. The collection of oral histories is noted as a disallowed cost, except when essential to provide contextual metadata for digitized collections. Is it acceptable to do recorded oral histories focused on sharing undocumented histories, untold stories about items being digitized? And is it acceptable to conduct recorded oral histories in order to create and archive openly accessible digitized stories to be used as an educational materials? uh, the Hidden Collections AUV is not a collecting grant. It is a digitization grant for obsolete materials that have not been previously digitized. Um, and unfortunately, no, creating oral histories is not a focus of this, regardless of how you're doing them. If you have a set of oral history on tapes, reel to reels, VHS, paper, and the likes, then and you want to digitize that, and they have not been previously digitized, then that will qualify.
And we do see people use advisory boards. So when we're talking about providing contextual metadata, like usually this is happening with
Outreach.
Indigenous projects or projects where you're dealing with communities where there are a small number of elders left who can speak to the collection that you're working with. And in those instances, it's more about them doing advisory work to provide the context than it is about really like building out a separate oral history collection to those projects.
Yeah. And we see that in outreach for
And it would typically be a more minor proportion of your expenses.
right.
Uh, I might be up. I lost track, sorry. Are there examples of how previous projects engaged communities or increased access when there are legal, ethical concerns on making materials fully available online? We have seen a couple groups where they will do a form of community access, in-person community access, um, for those materials that they're not willing to make publicly available, but if they have less sensitive issues, less sensitive items in the collection, they'll do broader public access for those. So sometimes there's a system of mitigated access. We also see where we have archives where they've provided full metadata for researchers to find materials, but the actual files are not available online. So they have a protocol for you to request the materials so they can make sure that they're being used appropriately, and only the metadata is broadly available.
Does a different collection in the same archive count as a resubmission? Um, I don't think so. If you're resubmitting an application, these are for people who applied last year with a particular project, with addressing the core values, with a cohesive theme, um, and they did not get accepted, and they want to resubmit for the same project. If you're going to do a new project with a different collection, then that would not be a resubmission. That would be a new project with a different cohesive theme with a different archive, if that makes sense. So no, I wouldn't consider that a resubmission.
We also have, in the context of this grant, is collection understood in the meaning used by archivists, or can it include multiple groups of materials in the same repository but with different archival provenance? Yes, particularly since these projects are even open to multiple organizations, we definitely see like a broad mix of collections and a mix of materials within those collections, and sometimes a combination of multiple collections. Typically, what you will find is there's some kind of cohesive um,
Theme.
focus or theme to those disparate connections. And if you have a proposal like that, it tends to be important to be able to clearly elucidate what that theme is, how the various collections fit the theme, and what broader story you're trying to tell so that you bring it all together so that the panel's not just like, what is this mishmash? But like, if there's a reason to put things together, you can definitely put things together.
For example, one time we had 26 newspapers across the Midwest. They created, that's on you to come up with that.
Yeah, if there's a reason they can be together and you can tell a compelling story to put them together, they can be together.
Yeah. Can doctoral candidates apply? Yes, as long as your organization, um, you fit the eligibility requirements for organizations, you name your PIs. You can have up to 3 PIs on any application.
And make sure you will have to provide a letter of commitment. So make sure that your organization is like involved.
Yes, please.
Are materials included in the budget? For instance, transferring VHS into digital form. So that would probably not be materials because that's digitization and that would be a vendor or services cost. But you can get equipment and supplies within the budget. I believe we're at a $15,000 limit right now. Some disallowed costs within that I want to name are like permanent furniture items. But like if you need rehousing supplies, or even if you're looking at like a scanner or some storage software, that is allowed. And I would point you to the guidelines. We have a further breakdown of allowed and disallowed costs within the equipment and supplies budget, but there is room in the budget.
I'm not sure what this one is too. To clarify, if an applicant owns or has the rights to a collection, but the collection is physically held by another organization, the holding organization must be listed as a collaborator. Um, so in order to be a collaborative project, both organizations must meet the eligibility requirements. So the collaborative means the applicant and any named partner must have substantial responsibilities for and interest in the project beyond the mere fiscal management of grant funds or the receipt of funds for services provided. Um, the so how to say it? So if you if your organization, the applicant, they have to be a nonprofit, they have to have cultural heritage as a primary or preservation as a primary function of them as a nonprofit, or and the collection is held by another organization. I would think the holding organization would be the lead applicant, and then you would probably be listed as a collaborator. And you can have non-unofficial collaborating organizations too. You can
Yeah.
have collaborations and authentic partnerships. You don't have to be listed on the project to be an organization that's going to take substantial or take a role in, in the project too.
I
But
would also maybe like email us with more information
yeah,
about specifically what you're talking about.
yeah,
When you say that they physically hold, like if you are working with an affiliate group like a library and they're storing your materials, but you
own it, collect.
own it and have physical acts, like if you can remove it from those environments to do the digitization necessary, then like they don't really hold it so much as they're storing it for you. So like
Those are
I would
tricky. Yeah,
say more about this perhaps just directly in an email, but if you're both eligible organizations, you could just collaborate.
yeah, you collaborate,
And that might be the easiest thing.
which would probably be the easiest.
Uh,
Here's another one that's probably going to need more information, Alyson. And we
yeah, if we were working,
go
oh,
ahead.
sorry, is that the one, Sharon?
Yeah, no, yeah, that's the one. Go ahead.
If we are working with members of a descendants community to digitize and share photos and documents that they are willing to share with us, would that qualify for this grant? That really depends on the community and the status of those materials. Like if you're talking a eligible tribal community, then yes. If they're privately held, then likely no. So we would need to know more about the descendant community, um, and who owns and holds the materials.
Yeah. Can we use materials we are collecting from the community for an exhibit that highlights unheard voices and fills a gap to qualify if it is being used for a virtual exhibit? Um, so I don't think the issue is that it's a virtual exhibit. The issue is this a collecting grant? This is not a collecting grant. So if you have materials that you own, if you qualify as an organization and you own and hold the materials, and this what I think is going to be an issue with you are rights, ethics, and reuse issues. And those materials have not been previously digitized, that then yes, maybe. This is another one we'll need more information about. I think the issue is going to be, do you own and hold it? Are you an organization that qualifies? Are you a nonprofit organization? Do you qualify as an organization? And do you own and hold those materials? It sounds like if you're in the process of collecting stuff, then you won't have the time frame won't allow for you to have a cohesive project that includes all of our five core values.
In feedback on a past final application, reviewers had questions about the rate of pay we proposed for various roles included on our team in our budget. We based the budget compensation on both compensation provided for other projects we had successfully completed recently and a market scan, consulting both other employers, including institutions, and job postings pay scales publicly available. Can you please advise on specific sources you recommend we use to inform our proposed compensation rates to ensure they are consistent with your expectations? The one thing that we typically point people to is the MIT Living Wage Calculator, but it kind of sounds like you're already doing your due diligence. And I would say what you may need to do is explain more in your proposal about the reasonings behind your rates. I don't know who you are, so I don't know what your institutional setting or your state setting is, but there's a wide range of environmental impacts on what an appropriate range for a region would be. We also see sometimes people at public universities have specific, like nailed down, like
Applications.
student worker rates or whatever, and they're statewide and they can't change them. And sometimes they don't spell that out in the proposal, so the panel is just, this is too low. So sometimes it's a matter that you need to adjust your rates, and sometimes it can be a matter that you just need to more fully explain why you believe you are coming with the right budget to begin with.
Yeah. Since all of our requests are related to vendor costs, could you confirm whether we need to include quotes from the vendor, or would it be better to add one to support our budget request with more concrete information? This is a great question. Service quotes are not required in the initial round. However, the reviewers, competitive applications are going to be ones that reviewers who understand the material types that you're trying to digitize, the quantity, they'll have an idea of what this should cost. And as long as you can explain that fully in your budget narrative, that the cost makes sense for digitization, for the type of materials, the quantity and types, that would be great. If you do have the opportunity to include a vendor quote, then by all means, yes, include that. But I know sometimes that's difficult.
Is it possible to see an example full budget from the final application of a project that received funding? I have seen the preliminary budget sample on your website, but I'm hoping for more granular detail on comp specifically. I don't believe we have one up right now. We are working on getting new AUV samples up as we speak. So I think we hope to have those up on the website within the next week or two. We are also pursuing possibly just doing some mock-up samples um, to be able to provide a broader range because honestly, these projects really vary based on organization size, in-house versus vendor, digitization, etc. So we don't necessarily want people to get the wrong takeaways.
Okay, somebody has three questions. Can an organization submit more than one application in this round? Yes, you can. They should be for different collections, and the PI can only have one name PI on that on any. This you can't have the same PI on multiple organizations, multiple grants if you get funded. Can part of the funds be used to make the digitization collections publicly accessible through a digital platform? Yes, that is true. The MSU Museum has three discrete collections that we feel would fall under the CLIR guidelines. Might we partner with Matrix, Center for Digital Humanities, to make them publicly accessible after the MSU Museum digitizes them? Could Matrix be the lead applicant even though the collections are held by the MSU Museum? If Matrix is going to act as your vendor, then the vendor cannot be a collaborating organization. They would be a service provider that would get paid underneath your organization.
Yeah, I would need to know more about what Matrix is to answer that question.
Yeah. So it sounds like, yeah, it is. Send us an email if you'd like, but if Matrix is acting as your vendor, then no, a vendor cannot be your collaborating organization.
Yeah.
But you could pay them as a service provider underneath your application. And let's see.
Are we allowed to hire an outside specialist to complete the digitization? Also, we have a special collections website already. However, not all of the collection is digitized, and this is why we want to apply. Do we still qualify? Yes and yes. This program allows you to do digitization either in-house if you have the capacity, or you can use outside vendors. If you are doing a mix of collections with a mix of materials, you can even use multiple different vendors if you need them for your specific format types. There is no requirement or expectation that you have never done digitization before, or that you do all of your materials at one time. We work with very large organizations at times, and they certainly don't have either fully digitized or fully analog collections. It's mostly a matter of making sure that what you're trying to digitize fits the appropriate scope of the program. And the panel is not really concerned with what else you're holding considerably past that.
Okay, the records we seek to digitize are from long-closed African American congregations, so there are no existing direct community members to engage in the process related to digitization and publishing. We can identify and engage, in effect, proxies from still open African American churches in the diocese or possibly descendants of the church memberships. Can you talk about A, how you wish to see community members engaged in the project for which grant funding is sought? For example, specific roles they might play in the work they may perform, and what CLIR wishes to see in terms of compensation from grant funds to individuals or perhaps the organizations they represent. That is, there's a preferred stipend or hourly rate to community members engaged in a consultant role. Thank you. So community member engagement in this project. I think you're looking in the right direction when you talk about other churches in the diocese or descendants of the church memberships. I'd also reach out to scholars in the particular field and reach out to them and have them assist you in how to emphasize and engage of that work. What reviewers want to see is that also, because this is a competitive grant application and program, they want to see that your collections have not just a local but national and transnational uh, appeal to researchers, the public, and in community engagement. So I would say look at scholars, and you're on the right path. As far as that is concerned, descendants and community members. And secondly, as far as compensation, I think we talked a little bit earlier about what adequate compensation looks for. We don't have a preferred stipend or hourly rate. I think that depends on how much engagement that they're going to be, how engaged they're going to be in this process. If they're going to be engaged in a process, sometimes people just do that outreach in the beginning. It depends on if your application or your project's going to be it could be 1 to 3 years. Are you going to use them all along the way? Then you would spread out that compensation across the 3 years. If it's going to be 1 year and you're just going to do the first half of that work plan, it should be contingent on how much you're utilizing them, how often you utilize them. We usually see compensation for honorariums and consultants be anywhere from 1,000 to like what, 15,000 sometimes. It just depends on what their role is going to be in your project. They just want to see that there's fair compensation and that people are not just coming into communities, taking their intellectual thought, taking their contributions, and they're an afterthought in this project. They want to see that you're engaging community along the way, and we're creating these authentic partnerships.
Read the requirement that the metadata needs to be public facing. Can the digitized materials be grouped into categories, or does each individual item need to be individually cataloged? We do not have a specific requirement for how you do your metadata breakdown. We do want people to be able to ideally find the files and know what they are about and be able to request them from a research standpoint, but we definitely we have a variety of organizations, and those variety of organizations handle materials a variety of ways. You'll see very few museums, for instance, that are going to do their metadata at the item level. So it really depends on your project and your institutional needs. And we will also say you don't have to share sensitive files if it's an ethical concern. So sometimes people are worried about the metadata related to those, and that metadata can be vague if you need it to because you're like trying to cover up PII or the like.
Yeah. Sorry.
I can get the next one. It's
No,
really easy.
okay.
Okay.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Do you have a list or FAQs for allowed and disallowed costs? At the end of the guidelines, there's a budget appendix. It goes over all the budget categories, the allowed and disallowed costs for all of them.
Does this grant cover the collection costs of the materials and resources? I'm not sure what you're calling collection costs. I don't know what they're referring to.
Yeah, if you're collecting, like if you don't have the materials and you are
No,
collecting them to build a collection, then no.
no. This is not a collecting grant in any way, shape, or form. Collaborations and allowable financial costs. If someone at organization A needs to travel to organization B to train people at organization B to do a portion of the digitization because materials are held by organization B, can those travel costs be a line item for the application? Absolutely, yes.
That was so
That
many
question.
words. Yes, project travel is eligible.
Yes. I love these questions.
Yep. Is it acceptable to use a portion of the funds to train staff in digitization work, say digitizing the cassettes in the collection described in the application so that digitization can happen in-house more easily in the future? Yes, there's space for training and consultants if you need consultants to come in and do digitization training on site.
What does it mean for materials to be owned and held by an eligible organization? We often tell those sharing their materials that those materials are always theirs, and if they want them removed from the archive, they can request this. This is a great question. You're going to have to fill out a rights, ethics, and reuse statement. The section is going to ask you to address any legal or ethical concerns and how those concerns or lack thereof will inform plans for access. Because remember, we want to make the metadata as often as possible publicly available. So we want to have access and reuse of the digitized materials and related to the metadata description. So what are we going to ask you about? We want you to understand that any rights or ethical concerns that will influence your project as you plan to provide community-centered access, which was one of the program's core values. So when we say owned and held, we want to make sure that there are no rights issues or restrictions that are going to keep you from being able to make um, those nominated materials publicly accessible through metadata description or any other way. So that's why we expect you to own and hold your collection. We don't want to put you in any legal problems, and we don't want to put ourselves in any legal issues that may come up from that.
Is there any guideline or policy to follow for sensitive materials that are going to be digitized through this grant but not published online? We don't have a specific set of guidelines regarding this. Typically, this is going to be specific to your project and the collections that you're working with. For instance, like we did a National Native American boarding school grant. If you're working with materials like that, you need to be familiar with NAGPRA, which is the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act. That is very specific to the focus of that proposal. We had another one out of Northeastern, that's a trans BIPOC project, and they built their own in-house kind of style guide and policy and procedure manual to deal with the materials because they are the community and they're the best kind of equipped to make those decisions. So because we work with a wide range of organization types, and a wide range of like focused materials. Maybe it's HIPAA, maybe it's NAGPRA. We don't dictate that to you, but we do expect you to be doing what's appropriate based on the stuff that you're working with.
Would creation of a virtual or physical exhibit based on digitized materials be eligible for funding? Okay, I'm just going to say that the primary focus of Digitizing Hidden Collection is just that digitization. So most of your funds need to go to getting your nominated materials prepared and ready for the digitization process. The digitization process should be the largest expense that you have in this project. And then any outreach that goes towards it would be second or third important expense that you would have in this. So if you want to create a virtual exhibit or a physical exhibit, as long as none of the disallowed costs which we talked about earlier, disallowed costs, please pay attention to budget, disallowed costs are not in it, then yes, you could possibly create a virtual or physical exhibit, but the focus of your project needs to be the digitization of materials that have not been born digital, that have not been previously digitized.
Are redigitization projects possible if the prior digitizer introduced many limiting issues? No, unfortunately, the program is not currently open to do digital reformatting or digitize previously digitized items at this time. I think, do we have any more?
Any more? Okay. Going once. I think that's it.
Okay, I'll put our last slide back up.
Yes, the presentation was recorded. We're going to talk about that now. Jane? Or Alyson, are you doing that one?
Yeah, we don't have the text there that we usually have. But we will be getting the transcript, the Q&A, and the recording online, I believe by the end of next week. We'd like to ask if you could please do the SurveyMonkey survey shown here, and we'll drop it in the chat just so we can try and make sure that we keep these useful for y'all, and we will remind you guys to check out the guidelines and to contact us at hiddencollections@clir.org if you have any questions. Jane, is there anything you wanted to throw on there, or did we catch it all?
You got it all.
Okay. So I think we're good, everybody. Thank you.